The Nashville Predators lost one and won one in their final two games before the break. On today's show, we're going to recap the weekend with our one word, share with you our thoughts on Joakim Kemell's NHL debut, and we're going to hear from Andrew Brunette on his work over the break.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this Monday episode shouting out our Locked On Predators insiders and our everydayers who tune in to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. It's been a season, and we love that you're along for the ride with us. I'm Ann Kemell. I am a writer and co-host with Penalty Box Radio, and friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predator site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
Well, Emma, the Nashville Predators wrapped up their pre-Four Nations play with a back-to-back this weekend. We're going to recap perhaps the ugliest game of the season, and then a win over the Buffalo Sabres. We're also going to look at Joakim Kemell's NHL debut, and we're going to share some very frank comments from Andrew Brunette about what he is focused on over this break. Before we dive into all of that, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, Emma, it is Monday, but full disclosure to our listeners, it is actually late Sunday afternoon. Emma and I are pre-recording this episode because we both have big plans for the Super Bowl. So before we dive into hockey, let's just put it out there, and then we'll live with, either the glory or the regret when this publishes tomorrow morning. But Emma, when you're looking at the game tonight between the Chiefs and the Eagles, who do you want to win and who do you have winning?
Well, as far as who I want to win, fly Eagles fly, baby. I'm a Steelers fan, as most of my loyal followers will know. My dog, Minka, upper management, who we see regularly here on the show, is named after a Steelers player. So as much as I do not want Kenny Pickett to win a Super Bowl ring with Philadelphia, I will accept that as the alternative. I've had enough of the Chiefs. I'm kind of tired of them. And as far as who I think will win, I really don't know. I really don't know. That look, the Eagles have Saquon, and I feel like with Saquon, all things are possible. So
let's go. That's me too. I am a Pennsylvania girl. I grew up watching the Buffalo Bills, who I really wanted in the Super Bowl, locked myself in the bathroom and cried, literally tears, 4 Super Bowls in a row, because just loved the Bills, loved football, loved that team, but also lived in Pittsburgh, loved the Steelers. I got to tell you, though, I'm a Penn State girl. Didn't graduate from there, but love Penn State. And I am like 100% for all good things for Saquon Barkley. These are not the two teams I would pick for a Super Bowl. Like if I could pick, who would I want to watch in the Super Bowl? These are not necessarily the two teams I would pick, but I really would love to see the Eagles win. I want Saquon to have all of the nice things. But dang it, Kansas City always finds a freaking way, don't they?
I know. I'm just tired. They're kind of becoming like the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick Patriots. It's like, okay, that's enough. Like you've had enough now. Let's give someone else a turn, kind of thing. And I don't know. For me, I am mostly excited for Kendrick Lamar. That's mostly why I'm watching tonight.
So that in the commercials, like my husband's jazzed because there's a couple of movie trailers dropping during the Super Bowl, and we're having people over, and my husband's like, they do know that we don't talk during the trailer premieres, right? And I'm like, we'll make that clear.
You need to lay out the house rules before you come in the door.
Let's know how this goes. But we'll see when this comes out. Here's hoping that the Eagles win. We'll see what happens. Do hope, regardless of the outcome, that the Super Bowl is more interesting the Nashville's Friday night game against the Chicago Blackhawks. Oh my goodness, y'all. Predators lost 6-2. They did come back Saturday night, got a win at home at Bridgestone Arena in a bit of a nail biter against the Buffalo Sabres. Emma, if you had to describe these two games this weekend in one word or more, how would you describe these two games before the break?
Well, two very different games, to be honest. I would say, I mean, Friday's game, ugly, straight up, ugly, ugly, ugly. So 3 words, ugly 3 times. It was that bad.
Yeah.
Saturday's game wasn't the prettiest at times, but I would say they definitely looked like they came to play on Saturday. It was fast, it was physical from the start. A lot of, energy in that game that we really didn't see in the game against Chicago. Yeah, the just Friday's game was so, I mean, to me, and of course, this was right after I made my little, my little declaration that I was ready to get on the fire Brunette train. And of course, Bruno goes out there on Friday and he supports my argument, which look, we know I love to be right, but he goes
Thank
out there,
you.
like, thank you. I am right. I know. But just like all of the line changes, I mean,
Maddening.
like it was maddening to watch. And it looks like the coaching looked panicked. Those moves looked panicked. It made the players look panicked and completely discombobulated. I mean, like, it wasn't just like, Joakim Kemell makes his NHL debut. He definitely looked a little nervous and a little overwhelmed on his first shift. Fine. I'll give him that. That's fine. I would be too. But it wasn't just like swapping him. At first, it was just swapping Kemell and Tommy Novak 1 for 1. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like, he's played with Svechkov before. That's fine. Just do that. But then it was like, oh no, every single line is different. And it was painful. It was so painful to watch. Saturday, we saw more consistency because there was more consistency in the personnel. The only thing we really didn't see was, and we found out afterwards, it was
Yes.
Fedor Svechkov played very, very minimally in the third period, and we found out afterwards apparently he's battling an illness, so that's why he was not playing as much. So hope he feels better. But yeah, it was like you said, a little bit of a nail biter against Buffalo, more than it probably needed to be. But I mean, that's the season.
That's the Nashville Predators season in a nutshell. If I had to summarize the weekend, I would summarize it by calling it like an NBA All-Star game. Basically no defense, but at times entertaining. And at times. Other times straight painful. But Nashville defensively, man, just not a lot going well defensively for this team. And, UC Saros, Eustace Ananen, they, of course, with the defense struggling in front of them, they maybe didn't have their best games either. I will say this, I was impressed by the Nashville Predators in the Buffalo game, in the sense that they went up really, they went up quickly 2-0, and you're like, here it is. Okay, they are going to be able to do this comeback thing, and they're going to bounce back. And then Buffalo ties it up, by the end of the first period. And then it's a back and forth game. And I will say I was impressed just with the mental fortitude that Nashville showed in that Buffalo game, because I feel like we saw Nashville kind of crumble and fold in Chicago when it got out of hand. And they didn't do that in Buffalo. And so for me, I was like, okay, clearly we are measuring positive things this season in the most minute increments, but I'll give them that. They didn't crumble when Buffalo pushed back. So for me, I thought that was good. Also, I have to tell you, loved that Tommy Novak scored in both of those games. He has 6 goals and 10 points in his last 10 games. Now, Novak, another one of the players, disastrous start to the season. Just absolute disaster of a start to the season. But I like what we're seeing from Tommy Novak. Forsberg, of course, had 2 goals against Buffalo. So did Brady Shea. Look at you, Brady Shea, standing there in the high slot all alone and making a goal. So,
Ryan O'Reilly with 4 primary assists.
Oh my gosh.
First 4 assists game in his career. I mean, he was everywhere. But true to form, how long did it take him? How long did it take him in the post-game interview for, I think it was like first question, he immediately like took a jab at himself. I don't remember exactly what he said, but something about like, yeah, I think at times my offense wasn't where it needed to be. It was like, bro, you single-handedly like caused 4 of the 6 goals that your team scored. Like, I think you're good. I don't think that you were the problem.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, bless him. Bless Ryan O'Reilly. But he was fantastic. You talk about sometimes you just need a guy to throw the team on their back. That was Ryan O'Reilly in the Buffalo game. And friends, that's why he's in the Predators locker room. That's why he's so important. Coming up, we also saw, like we said, the debut of Joakim Kemell. We're going to tell you what we saw from his ice time, and we're going to hear from Kemell and Andrew Brunette on his performance. Today's episode's brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Emma, we talked about the games against Chicago and Buffalo, and we mentioned, look, defensively, maybe not Nashville's best game, but there is some news on the blue line. And friends, this is, I think, positive news. Nashville, of course, we talk about what's gone on with the blue line and what's in the pipeline, but the Predators did sign Adam Wilsby yesterday to a new 2-year contract. When you look at this move, Emma, are you surprised? What do you think about this?
No, I think that it makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is a guy that Barry Trotz in particular has been very high on really for the last 2 years. He's come up to the NHL this season and really done kind of exactly what's expected of him. He's not he is really a defensive defenseman, which is what this team really needs. We don't need any more offensive defensemen. And I mean, he's been really solid. He hasn't, like, aside from the one gaffe that he had, I can't remember which game it was now, but where he tried to make a play where he should have just cleared the puck and it left. But like, everyone's done that. Roman Yossi's done that this year. Like, it happens. It is what it is. He's been really solid, really reliable. Obviously dealing with an injury heading into the break here, but he's a big body. He's physical. Mm-hmm. He plays the way that, this team wants to play. So I think that, it makes good sense to me to, and it kind of shows him that it's like, hey, we see you as part of the plan, like part of the future plan here, which I think is all good, all promising.
Yeah. And he's somebody that, previous to seeing him this season, I don't know that a lot of people talked about his potential defensively. He just was kind of one of those under the radar guys. But when you see him at the NHL level, this is a player that you're like, okay, you can do this. He may not be one of those premier names that you hear when you talk about Nashville's pipeline or somebody that you expected to be, a main piece of the defensive roster, but I think he's proven his value, and I think he's going to be a really good, and I think he's going to be an important piece for the Predators, especially over the next 2 years when you are still waiting to get some of those defensive pipeline players into the NHL. I think Willsby is a good stopgap guy for the Predators. Another player that we want to talk about, Joakim Kemell. Friends, made his NHL debut, just like Emma and I said should happen, by the way. Really loved what we saw from him. I love, that in his first game, like you mentioned, first shift, a little rocky, which you can't blame him for, but ended up putting the most shots on goal of anyone on the team against Chicago. 7 shots on goal, 100% here for that. Shoot the puck.
And true to form, not just shots, but he was cranking those things. And he had a couple against Buffalo too that, like, of course we need to work on our accuracy a little bit, but if we're talking about the strength of the shot, whew, this is what we were talking about last week, y'all, when we were saying that this guy can shoot it. I mean, there was one, I think, in the first period of the Buffalo game where he just cranked a shot and it was high. It went high, so it hit the glass, but you could tell by how loud that was. You're like, oh, that had some sauce to it. So just look out. We'll be seeing more of that, I'm sure.
I thought it was interesting in that's a tricky thing. Where do you slot somebody like this in, especially when Svechkov and Novak have played so well together? But this is where I come back to Colton Sissons is so important to this team, because he's 100% the guy you put out there with somebody making their NHL debut, Mr. Potato Head, showing up, doing the things.
Well, but Kemell was like talking about where he played. I mean, where didn't he play? It's kind of like that was the story of that game and why it was so frustrating to watch, because it was the constant blender of lines. It was he was supposed to start on the line with O'Reilly and Nyquist. He had a rocky first shift. Bruno with the quick pull, the quick yank, and had him down there with Sissons and Novak. And Sissons and Novak, I don't think were even supposed to start together. And they ended up together. Like it was just a whole thing.
There's going to be a whole conversation coming up over this 2-week break where Emma and I are going to dive into the whole line blender thing. We have a lot of thoughts about that. Joakim Kemell, of course, made his NHL debut in Chicago. His parents were able to make it to the game. And friends, nothing warms the cockles of my heart like seeing a mom and dad watch their kid make their NHL debut. After the Buffalo game, we got a chance to hear from Joakim Kemell. He talked about his first game and his experience in the NHL in these 2 games. He also talked about what it meant to him to have mom and dad there.
Of course, the game is way faster and guys are more skilled here, but like first game, it was a little slow start from me, but like when I got into it, I felt good. It was special, and I'm so happy that they got here and everything we got figured out for them, and it was awesome.
If you had to bet, Emma, do you think we're going to see him the rest of the season in Nashville?
Well, he has, of course, been reassigned to Milwaukee for the break. And I'm sure that, he'll probably stay down there for a little bit. That depends on obviously the health of Zach LaRue, Luke Evangelista, Mark Jankowski, have some movement there. But if the question is that the last time we'll see him in Nashville this season, I'm going to go with no.
Yeah. And I think a lot is going to depend on what happens at the trade deadline, because it will be very interesting to see what this roster looks like when the deadline hits, because I think Barry Trotz is going to be making some moves, and that may open up a more permanent slot for Kemell, which I'm all for getting him. Look, I'm all for getting him more experience at the NHL level. We did, of course, ask Andrew Brunette, what did he see in Kemell's debut this weekend? This is what he had to say.
Yeah, I thought he was really good. I think we just got in a situation where we had obviously Svetch wasn't quite on top of his game. He's fighting something, and he was pretty sick, so we kind of got the bench short and down the stretch rolling 3 lines. But I think he looked really comfortable. His first period in Chicago, I thought he looked a little nervous, and he settled in pretty good. And I thought he was fine tonight, and you could see what he can bring. I'm looking forward to watching him grow.
Yeah, I think you got to have grace for that first shift or two when you make your NHL debut, because on the one hand, you need to be there and you need to be about hockey, but you also need to freeze that moment in your mind where your skate blade hits that NHL ice for the first time. And so lots of grace for any of these players who make their NHL debut in those first or second shifts. But Kemell, I think, settled in pretty quickly. Overall, I think you can see the potential.
Oh yeah, especially, I mean, we talked about the shot, he's taking those chances and he's being aggressive with it, and I hope that he continues to do that. Obviously just work out some of the little details, the finer details, and I think that he, you like you said, you can definitely see it. You can see it's there.
Yeah. It'll be fun to see what happens with him as the season goes on. Coming up, the NHL, of course, is beginning its 4 nations face-off break. Some of the Nashville Predators, of course, will be representing their home countries in that tournament. Some are headed on vacation to Turks and Caicos. But what is Andrew Brunette going to be doing with this time off? We're going to tell you what he had to say coming up. Today's episode's brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Businesses don't slow down, even if you're in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That is exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. All right, Emma, we mentioned the 4 nations face-off kicking off later this week. We are going to preview that coming up. We're going to talk about the teams, tell you who we think has the best shot, who we're pulling for. We'll see if we're any better at predicting that than we are the Super Bowl. But Andrew Brunette, he's got some things that he is going to be doing over break. Now, we did ask him earlier in the week, is he going to be watching the 4 nations? He's like, yeah, I'm probably going to be watching it. And of course, then we're like, who you rooting for? And he's very diplomatic. And he said, well, I'm mostly just like watching for individual performances. Of course, the guys on the team, but then some of the other guys that I've coached. And very diplomatic in his response. But he was very frank when we asked after the Buffalo game, what are you focused on in the break? And I thought this was such an interesting and frank response from Andrew Brunette. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think you take a couple days off without but you say that, but no, there's lots. There's lots there, and I wish I had some of the answers for this group, and I really still don't after 50 some, and kind of reassess where I'm at and where our group's at and how can I help them. And there's a few things in mind that tweak wise, and we got 4 days of practice, which will be nice, and see if we can come up with a few things. And liked a lot of the things we've done offensively, and I know the results aren't there, but the expected goals and the zone 1 shots and all the things that I believe are important are there. So I'm going to go back and look, and maybe I'm not, maybe they're not that important, but I believe they are. But I think I'll dig into that a little bit, and there's some things defensively I'd like to dig into. So it's hard sometimes during the course where we're at right now to make big adjustments, but I think there's some tweaks that we could do.
When you heard that comment in the Buffalo post game, Emma, m- my first thought is when he says, I still don't have answers after 50 some games with this team. Do you think that is an indictment of Andrew Brunette as a coach? Do you think it is an indictment of this team's inconsistency? Do you think it's zebras and it's a little of both?
I think it's just an indictment of the entire thing. I was referring to it as a marriage, like the marriage between this coaching system and these players. It's not working, it's not successful. And it doesn't mean that they hate each other or that they are like oil and water, or that it's become a bad situation culture wise. It's just, it's not working. And I think that when he said, I still don't have answers after 50 some games, my first thought is, well, I think that's your answer, pal. It means like whatever this is, it's not working. And it's not really fair to ask a coach to change his system, just as it wouldn't be fair to ask a player to change what he does. Like, hey, Philip Forsberg, go play defense. Like, you wouldn't do that. So I think that's kind of where I landed on the, maybe this is not the right marriage, like this coaching system and this team.
Yeah. It's so interesting when he made that comment. I thought, okay, first of all, that was very introspective. But it brings me back to that, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And it's like, I don't know if you can figure out what is the cause and what is the effect in this. Like, I do think there were some things in retrospect Andrew Brunette would do differently with the team to start the season off. But I also think that there were issues, not necessarily, and I know people will disagree with me about this. I don't necessarily think the biggest issues with the roster is roster construction. I think it was settling into such a different roster. And, you've got to be able to coach a team out of that. But I agree with you. If the system is a puzzle piece that doesn't click in with the roster you have, it doesn't fit. You can't, no matter how hard you push that puzzle piece together, if it's not meant to fit, it doesn't fit.
Well, and you think about it too, like even last year, with how long it took this team to adjust to the system, and they needed to go on a record-breaking win streak or point streak just to get out of it. That is not a recipe for sustained success. Like, you don't want to have to do that every year. And now, of course, this year we're probably past the point of no return on that. But I think that regardless, we've now seen it for 2 years. The first year it worked out in resulted in a playoff run, playoff appearance, but now you're starting to see it and it's like, okay, last year we could be more patient with it. Now the stakes are higher, the expectations are raised. You can't really be as patient anymore. So after you've invested all of this into, building this team, you might, you can't really be as patient anymore. Again, I still say this year's already a lost cause. But I think that if you look ahead to next year, yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning, is like, it's not a good fit. We tried, and that's fine, but you got to be able to admit, when something's not working.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that he talks about making some tweaks. And like you said, this season, you can't salvage a ton from this season, but you have to wonder at this point, are there quote unquote tweaks that can do enough in the remaining 20 some games to put this team not just habitually, but mentally in a good place to springboard into next season. And I think you also have to factor in, you may want to do some tweaks here and there, but you are also going to have to probably adjust to the fact that this roster is not going to look the same after the March deadline than it does now. And there's a whole adjustment period in that as well. I don't know how much Andrew Brunette is going to be able to tweak this team into a successful ending of the season, which, let's face it, it's going to end in the regular season. It'll be interesting to see what he does. I don't know. I don't know if there is enough that can get this team turned around and at least headed in the right direction to finish the season.
And this also isn't the first time this year that he's told us that he's made tweaks or thinking about
Right.
making tweaks. So it's like, I think I don't know how much more tweakage can really, be fixing whatever this is. Like, again, you tried, gave it the old college try, but I just and again, I'm not saying the system is bad or it's wrong or it's a losing brand of hockey. I'm just saying that it's not for everyone.
Mhm.
And that's just kind of what we're seeing with this team right now.
Yep. Coach the team you have, not the team you wish you had. That's a whole podcast. And friends, we're going to dive into that, of course, over the Four Nations break. While the Nashville Predators may be off over the next couple of weeks, Emma and I, friends, we are not. We are going to be here. Of course, we are going to preview the Four Nations face-off. We're going to talk about the Nashville Predators that are there. We're going to tell you what we think of the teams, and we'll recap the games through that tournament as well. We're also going to look very closely at the first 54 games of this season. We are going to talk about coaching, roster construction, rebuilding. We're also going to look ahead to the draft. So we have a lot of great content on tap for you. Make sure that you tune in to Locked On Predators each and every weekday. We're going to be here and work our way through this break and try to dissect what in the what just happened and how in the how we move forward. Before we wrap up this Monday episode, Emma, will you let everyone know where they can find you and your work?
Yes, you can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well. Friends, that is going to do it for this Monday episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thanks again so much for making us your first listen of the day. Go Eagles, or congratulations, Kansas City Chiefs. We'll see how it all pans out. Hope you guys have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.